Let me tell you about that magnificent episode in human history. The Comune de París. The story starts with stupidity. I'm speaking of Napoleon III, nephew of Bonaparte. He was a buffoon, a stage actor smiling to the crowds while 16 million French peasants lived in blind, dark hovels, their children dying of starvation. But because he kept the legislature, because people voted, people thought that they had a democracy. A common mistake. Bonaparte wanted glory, so he made the mistake of attacking Bismarck's armies and was quickly defeated. Whereupon the victorious German troops marched into Paris, where they were met by something more devastating than guns: silence. They found the statutes of Paris draped in black, an immense, invisible, silent resistance. So they did the wise thing. They paraded to the Arc de Triomphe and quickly departed. The old French order, the Republic, liberals they called themselves, they did not dare come into Paris. They trembled with fear because with the Germans gone, Paris was taken over by the workers, the housewives, the intellectuals, the clerks, the armed citizens. The people of Paris formed not a government, but something more glorious, something that governments everywhere fear: a commune, the collective energy of the people. It was the Commune de Paris. People were meeting 24 hours a day, everywhere, knots of 3 and 4, making decisions together. For the city was surrounded by the French army, threatening to invade at any moment. But Paris became the first free city in the world, the first enclave of liberty in a world of tyranny. If you want to know what I mean by the dictatorship of the proletariat, look at the Commune de Paris. That is a true democracy. Not the democracy of England or America, where elections are circuses, where people are voting for one or another guardian of the old order, where whatever candidate wins, the rich go on ruling the country. It was the Commune de Paris. It only lived for a few months, but it was the first legislative body in history to represent the poor. Its laws were for them. It abolished their debts and postponed their rents. And it forced the pawn shops to return their most necessary possessions. Their leaders refused to take salaries higher than the workers. They shortened the hours for bakers and planned how to give free admission to the theaters for everyone. And the great Courbet himself, whose paintings had stunned Europe, presided over the Federation of the Artists. They reopened the museums and set up a commission for the education of women, something unheard of, the education of women. And they took advantage of the latest in science, the lighter-than-air balloon. They launched one from Paris to soar over the countrysides, dropping printed materials to the peasants. It's a simple, powerful message. Our interests are the same. A message that should be dropped to workers everywhere in the world. And the Commune declared the purpose of schools to teach the children to love and respect their fellow creatures. I've read your endless discussions of education. What nonsense! It teaches everything necessary to succeed in a capitalist world. But does it teach the youth to struggle for justice? The communards understood the importance of that. They taught not only with their words, but with their acts. They destroyed the guillotine, that instrument of tyranny, even revolutionary tyranny. And then, wearing red scarves, carrying a huge red banner, buildings festooned in sheets of red silk, they gathered around the Vendôme column, that symbol of military power. A huge statue surmounted by the bronze head of Napoleon Bonaparte. A pulley was attached to the head, capstan turned, and the head came crashing to the ground. And people climbed over the ruins. A red flag now floated from the top of the pedestal. Now it was a pedestal not of one country, but of the whole human race. Men and women watching wept with joy. That was the Commune. The streets were always full. Discussions were going on everywhere. People shared things. They seemed to smile more often. Kindness ruled. And the streets of Paris were safe without police of any kind. That is socialism. Of course, that example of the Commune could not be allowed. So the army of the Republic marched into Paris and commenced the slaughter. The leaders of the Commune were taken to the Père Lachaise cemetery and lined against the stone walls and shot. Altogether, 30,000 people were killed. Ha! The Commune was crushed by the wolves and swine, but it was the most glorious achievement of our time. Ha! They feared the Commune. It was dangerous. It was too inspiring an example for the rest of the world, so they drowned it in blood. It still happens, does it not, that whenever in some corner of the world people, innocent of ideology, just angry with their lives, push aside the old order and commence to experiment with a new way of living, that it cannot be permitted. So they, you know who I mean by they, set about to destroy it, sometimes insidiously, covertly, sometimes directly and violently. They claim, because the Soviet Union collapsed, that communism is dead. Do these idiots know what communism is? Do they think that a system run by a thug who kills his fellow revolutionaries is communism? Scheißkopf. Journalists and politicians who say such things, what kind of education did they have? Did they ever read the Communist Manifesto that Engels and I wrote when we were young men? In place of the old bourgeois society, with its classes and class antagonisms, we shall have an association in which the free development of each is the condition for the free development of all. Did you hear that? An association. Do you know what the objective of communism is? The freedom of the individual to develop himself, herself, as a compassionate human being. Do they think that just because someone calls himself a communist or a socialist and then acts like a gangster, understands what communism is? To kill those that disagree with you. Is that the communism that I gave my life for? That monster in Russia who grabbed all the power for himself and insisted upon interpreting my ideas like a religious fanatic, when he was lining his old comrades up against the wall in front of firing squads, did he allow his citizens to read the letter that I wrote to the New York Tribune, in which I said that capital punishment cannot be justified in any society calling itself civilized? Communism is not supposed to reproduce the stupidities of capitalism. Yeah, Engels and I spoke of a dictatorship of the proletariat, but not the dictatorship of a party or a central committee, not the dictatorship of one man, but a temporary dictatorship of the working class. The mass of the people will take over the state and govern in the interest of all, until such time as the state itself becomes unnecessary and gradually disappears. Bakunin, of course, disagreed. He said that any state, even a worker state, if it had army, police, prisons, will become a tyranny. Bakunin loved to argue with me. They keep saying that capitalism has triumphed. Triumph? Why? Because the stock market has risen to the sky and shareholders are even wealthier than they were before? Triumphed when 1/4 of American children live in poverty? and 40,000 of them die every year before their first birthday. $100,000 people line up before dawn in New York City for 2,000 jobs. What will happen to the 98,000 people who are turned away? Is that why you're building more prisons? Oh yeah, capitalism has triumphed. But over whom? You have miracles of technology. You've sent man into their stratosphere. But what of the people remaining here on earth? Why are they so fearful? Why did they turn to drugs, to alcohol? Why did they go berserk and kill? It's all in your papers. And your politicians, bloated with pride, will say, oh, now the world will move to the free enterprise system. Has everyone become stupid? Don't you know the history of the free enterprise system? When the governments did nothing for the people and everything for the rich? When your government gave 100 million acres of land free to the railroads and looks the other way as the Chinese immigrants and Irish immigrants working 12 hours a day building the railroads died in the heat and cold. And when the workers finally rebelled and went on strike, your government sent in the army to smash them into submission. Why did I write Das Kapital if I did not see the miseries of capitalism, of the free enterprise system? In England, little children were put to work in the textile mills because their tiny fingers could work the spindles. Here in America, young girls went to work in the mills of Massachusetts at age 10 and died at age 25. Cities were cesspools of poverty and vice. That is capitalism. Then and now. All right, I confess, I did not reckon with capitalism's ingeniousness in surviving. I could not imagine that there would be drugs to keep a sick system alive, wars to keep industries going, and to make people so crazed with patriotism that they forget their own misery. And religious fanatics promising the masses that Jesus is going to return. I know Jesus. He's not coming back. I was wrong in 1848, thinking that capitalism was on its way out. My timing was a bit off, perhaps by 200 years. But the system will be transformed. All of our present systems will be transformed. People are not fools. I remember the words of your President Lincoln when he said, you cannot fool all of the people all of the time. Our common sense, our instinct for decency and justice will bring us all together. Don't scoff. It has happened before, and it can happen again on a much grander scale. And when it does, the rulers of society, with all of their wealth and all of their armies, will be helpless to prevent it. Their servants will refuse to serve, and their soldiers will disobey orders. Yeah, capitalism has accomplished wonders unsurpassed in history, but it is still preparing its own death. Its voracious appetite for profit, more profit, creates a world of chaos. It turns everything, art, music, literature, even beauty itself, into commodities to be bought and sold. It turns human beings into commodities, and not just the factory workers, the physicians, the scientists, the lawyers, the poets, the artists. They all must sell themselves in order to survive. And what will happen when we all finally realize that we are all workers and that we all have a common enemy? We will come together with others to fulfill ourselves. And not just those in our own country. Capitalism needs a global market. Its cry is free trade because it needs to wander freely everywhere in the world to make more profit. But in so doing, it is unwittingly creating a global culture. People are crossing borders as never before in history. And ideas are crossing borders with them. Something new is bound to come of this. I miss my daughters. When I was living with Jenny in Paris in 1843, I was 25, and I wrote that in the new industrial system, people are estranged from their work because it is distasteful to them. They are estranged from nature when smoke, smells, noise invade their senses. And they are estranged from others because everyone is pitted against everyone else, scrambling for survival. And they are estranged from their own selves, living a life that's not their own, living as they do not really want to live in the hope that a good life is possible, but only in dreams, in fantasies. But it does not have to be. There is still a possibility of choice. Yeah, just a possibility, I admit. Nothing is certain. That I now know. I was too damn certain. But I do know one thing, that anything is possible. But it requires for people to get up off their ass. Does that sound too radical for you? Remember, being radical simply means to grasp the root of the problem. And the root of the problem is us.